I'm Jen West, professional rebel of delight.
And I'm Dave Wiesdock, sage of creative scaffolding.
And this is shadow casting. Good day, listener audience. It's great to be back on another shadow cast with you. And it is our favorite type, which is our quote cast. Oh my gosh,
Quote day!
Day. We always sing it. I showed the audience is doing it now. Quote day. If you're not, start. It feels
That's
good.
right. We got to get into it. Quote day!
Oh. All right. This week's quote is a little bit different than what we normally do because I pulled it directly out of the middle of a book. And so it has no context on either side. So before we start, I'm going to start with the context. This is from the book, The Inner Game of Tennis by W. Timothy Gallwey. And it's a really cool book. Its context is around tennis, but it's actually about life and how to use your brain better. In the book, he basically says there are two sides in talking inside of our brain. One side is self one, and self one is the one that makes decisions and says whether things are good or bad and analyzes how we do stuff. It's basically the dissecting part of our brain. And then self two is the thing that the part of the brain that actually implements stuff. It's what happens when we're in flow state or when our day is going great. It's just what makes it work. And his theory is that if we can get self one, that judgmental side, out of the way, self two can take over and just make things work. But it's more unconscious and we have to have more trust and it doesn't talk to us as much. So that's where he gets to. An example is playing tennis. Our self one brain wants us to think about how our elbow is and where our knee is and how far our swing is to make the ball go where it goes. And his argument is you just say you want the ball to go there and you keep swinging and observing where the ball ends and the body will correct itself. So far, we making sense, Dave?
Yeah, this is just some great material, I think, before we dig into the quote. I feel like for shadow casting, we often talk a lot into the mental games and the mental world because we're looking at archetypes or beliefs first knowing or the seeker. And so when we are moving into almost a somatic or a body sense, I feel like this is taking it to that next level. You know, we're saying that there is that mental part, that number one that you were talking about. And there's this whole other part too, this sort of, when we were talking about it, I was calling it muscle memory, but it's different than that. It's this acute awareness that you're bringing attention to something specific and your body is starting to calibrate over time. And so it's kind of creating this mind-body connection. And that, I think, is a really cool way of looking at this. So I'm really excited that this is our quote today, because I think this is something that you and I talk about a lot off the podcast. And it's something I would love to see being brought in more. And what a great way to introduce this concept.
Yeah, and it's a tough thing to trust because it's not the talkative side. And from examples that he gives in the book, change happens fairly quickly once you relax into it. And that gets us to our quote. So our quote from Timothy Gallwey is, "But of course, the instant I try to make myself relax, true relaxation vanishes. And in its place is a strange phenomenon called trying to relax. Relaxation happens only when allowed, not as a result of trying or making."
I mean, just to start, I gotta say the quote that comes to mind when I think of this quote now, because the Star Wars nerd in me, here's the Yoda quote: do or do not, there is no try, right? Try not, do or do not.
Exactly. Well, and you know what's funny of that? That comes from Krishnamurti.
Really?
Do or do not. Yeah, I found it in one of his books. So
this is like a universal concept. What a great.
Wow. But Yoda's the best. I mean, who doesn't love do or do not? There is no try.
Right. What better way to hear that than in an inverted sentence, right?
Yeah. This is the game. We know what it's like. People say, just relax, calm down. That's the last thing you're going to do, right? You're going to get all tense and pissed off and actually probably rage at them.
Yeah. No, and it's it's what really jumped out at me. Let me try to find relaxation happens only when allowed.
Yeah.
That really poked me, like in a good way. There's other philosophies like Wu Wei or non-action, but it's this idea of just allowance. And I don't know, when I read that part of the sentence, my body even takes like a big inhale, there's like this even relaxation sense within me. And I was thinking about, I haven't really talked about it much on the podcast, but this was something really cool that happened a couple weeks ago. And I think it ties into this. And I hadn't really thought about it in this concept until just now. I thought it was sort of a fluke or something. But for the audience that doesn't know, I have a eye thing called keratoconus. And so I can't see very well, like far away or even really up close. And a few weeks ago, we decided to go bowling. And it had been a long time since I bowled. And so the pins were fuzzy in front of me. I couldn't really see. And I wasn't even really going to try. I was just kind of there to have fun. And if I could hit some pins, great. What ended up happening is, of course, being the type 1 competitive guy in me, I started to still want to try a little bit. And so the first few times I threw the ball, I ended up getting gutter balls. And then I'm like, all right, well, you know what? I'm trying and it's not working. Like, I know I'm not really going to see all that well. So I'm just going to focus on the triangle in front of me that I can see. And whatever happens from there happens. And so when I just kind of allowed myself to set a goalpost in for me that like I could see and I relaxed into that, which came from me allowing to decide how I wanted to have my fun. I got strikes, I got spares. I mean, it was crazy. And I mean, it wasn't a ton, but the game totally changed. It went from 0 frames to, at least I was getting 7 or 8 pins a frame. And that was huge. But for me, I think putting this all together now and in this context of the quote, it was because I allowed myself to just relax and just be in the game and not focus on the outcome. And I think that's, at least for me, what I think they're poking at with the trying. When we try, when we say we're going to try, what happens is our mind is being focused on the goal and the outcome and not the moment of the action. And the moment of the action is where the outcome comes from, not in being in the future, but being in the present. And so that's just what came for me in this quote.
Yeah, that powerful and perfect example, Dave. It really is. And what's really great about it is the focus change. Like you said, from outcome to, I can see this, I can make the ball go here. And that's what he talks about in the book. It's this changing your mindset to one piece and letting the other pieces come into line. The body knows, and we don't trust it because it doesn't say, hey, I got this. I got this. We like the one that's saying, no, do this particular thing with this part of your body and this particular thing, and have a 10-point list on how to fix it. And then you've got too much to think about. The body can't adapt because the brain keeps getting in the way, that thinker side. So it's really much like I need to do with my voice right now. Slowing down, take a breath, and allow things to come. And it's crazy when that happens because the body responds and you feel like it's magic because it's not the thinker side.
Right. And that's why the story didn't make sense in this context until we started talking about the quote, because it felt like a fluke, to be honest. But when I see it in this sense now, I get it. I got out of my own way and I allowed myself to just relax into the moment. And the best part is that even though the score got better, that even stopped being the focus. I said at the beginning of the story that it kind of turned a little competitive, but it ended up just being fun. And that's a new experience for me that I hadn't had with bowling before. And I see Jen smiling because she knows that. And so it's one of those things where that's the power of these sort of quotes and these concepts that we share, is that as we start to bring attention to things, it doesn't have to be this huge active 10-point list of changes. Just bringing our attention to one thing that our mind can focus around and create change around can make all the difference for us.
And I think we've talked about this in other podcasts, like washing dishes and just paying attention to the water being warm. And then we just allow everything to unfold. So I think for our listener audience, based on this quote, how can you allow things to happen, to allow your body, to allow your inner knowing to take a little bit more control? It's good to have that thinker side so you can critique and know where things should be or how you want them to be better. But then once you know that, you got to step back a little and you got to allow it to unfold. And what does that feel like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question for the listener audience. And, we'll look forward to seeing that in the comments. Thank you guys so much for listening today. We hope you enjoyed listening to this quote. And I'm really glad that, again, we brought this body awareness, somatic sense into this conversation. I think that this was a really juicy topic for our audience this week. And as always, make sure to like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening from. Be sure to share our podcast out. We love to grow our audience and we love to hear from you guys. And
until next time.
see ya.